Okay. All right. Um, so our first order of business is to take a look at the MLP's proposed FY26 budget. So we have Gail and Steve, and of course Jim. Uh, Gail, how would you like to proceed? I'm going to share your budget. Let's see. And would you like to kind of walk us through this, or is
Yeah,
Steve?
yeah. I think
Okay,
we I heard you say that you have a lot to get through, so
yeah,
this can be fairly quick. Why don't
okay.
I not bury the lead, and we'll just
Hmm.
start by saying
Hmm.
our overall budget is has gone down, but there's some
Hmm.
factors that mean that the price to all of us as customers of the MLP are going to go up. And you're like, well, how is that possible? I will explain.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a small increase, but as you have all been working very hard and figuring out, the costs of everything are just going up, and that it's hitting us too. So
Hmm.
we're trying to keep our cost to our residents as low as possible, but still protect our network. We need to have enough in reserves in case things happen like big storms. We're all talking about the weather and the
Hmm.
cold and the ice and the wind, and that has a direct effect on our network. So um, let's see. So that first line, our annual maintenance, we are leaving that flat. We had a big year last year with our pole moves because of the power upgrades that were done by National Grid. And that really decimated our reserves. We were able to get through the year by not uh, increasing the charges, but we don't have really much in the way of reserves at all left. So we need to build that back up. Um, so we're keeping that number the same. There, as of just this morning, I have an update to the budget of that next line for insurance, where our deductible went up to $100,000 from $15,000
Hmm.
with Mia. We got reinsured today from Perma. So that is a correction there. The deductible is
Hmm.
25,000. But again, that's something else we have to keep in mind with our maintenance budget, because if there is a big storm, our deductible is $10,000 higher than it was, better than 100,000. But
Hmm.
still something that's happening in the insurance industry right now, where it's hard to
Hmm.
get insured and deductibles are really high. So thank goodness for PERMA. And we are covered and with a semi-reasonable deductible. Um, Backhaul costs are lowered. This we're paying the same, but we had an incorrect line in our budget. Luckily, it was much higher than it needed to be. So you'll see a really nice 20% decrease there. So that's helping our budget out an awful lot.
Hmm.
Um, Below that, and I think you've probably noticed by now, the green cells are indicating the number is going down from the previous year. The red cells indicate going
Hmm.
up. So I put in a 3% COLA increase, but that'll be TBA when the select board decides what to grant non-union employees. So this will be adjusted accordingly in our final budget. Going down a little bit further, the next green cell, everything else is flat there. We're not changing anything in the middle. Our debt service is going down a little bit. We are getting so close. Debt payoff in 2030. When that happens, I expect that we will be able to lower rates for our residents. It's going to be a really um, uh, huge kind actually our biggest expense is our capital debt there. And so when that goes away, we're going to be in a really, really good position. So just 5 more years for that. Below that, you'll see a big increase for the indirect costs that we reimburse to the town for the accountant, the auditor, and the treasurer. This whole increase is due to the auditor expense that we didn't know. It cost as much as it did, and just no one told us that it was $4,000 every other year for the audits. So we have now accounted for that so that we can reimburse the town appropriately. Let's see. So you'll notice that our overall operations subtotal there has gone down by about 4.2%. So that is good news. And the emergency reserve fund is going up, but that's more of just a balancer for a budget. So below that, you'll notice for income that we are increasing the MLP. Sorry, if you go down all the way down to the MLP monthly fee with 5.26%. So this was $38. We're increasing it by $2. And our internet service provider is increasing the fee to us by $4. So what this means is right now, our residents are paying $60 a month for just internet. That cost is going to go up to $66 a month. So overall, it's going to be an increase of 10%. And all things considered, that's very good. We are still running the lowest cost municipal network in the state. Towns nearby are charging $75, $85. So we're still doing great. But unfortunately, we do have to have an increase this year.
Gail, I think some of the numbers that you just walked us through, I'm having trouble reconciling them with what I'm looking at. But is that
Okay.
because I made a change while you were talking? I increased that insurance line.
Okay.
Was
Yeah,
I not
so
supposed to do that?
no, that's
Okay.
our deductible is going up to 25 grand. Our premium is,
Ah,
you can leave the premium there at 12. It's just the
okay.
deductible.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Okay. So that's what it was. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, are you all seeing problems with insurance costs going like very, very badly?
Yeah.
I'm up.
All aspects of
Yeah.
insurance across all society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Health insurance has been a big
Yeah. Yeah.
problem for us this year. Okay. Got it.
I was going
So
to ask you on that topic, is that a one-year deal on the insurance, or do you have any idea what it's going to cost next year?
No idea, Bob. No
Okay.
idea. It is the wild west of insurance. I talked to um our agent who works with the underwriters, and I don't know a ton about insurance. I just asked him his questions, and when I asked him about like what's going on with this increase in deductible, like I understand a little bit, but going up to $100,000, and he said he's never seen this in his career. And they have no idea what's happening if for the future. We just have to ride it out. Luckily, PERMA is a public utility, it stands for Public Utility Risk Management Association. And so they're a nonprofit insurance, and they work with municipalities to provide coverage. They're similar to MIA, but they have these great rates, so we're taking them.
Mhm. Got it. All right. Any questions from the FinCom?
One question, you said,
Okay.
I'm sorry, can I raise my hand?
Oh, that's okay, George. You can
Yeah, I can raise my hand now, yes.
go.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned that the service provider, is that Whip City that's raising their fee $4? South Hadley?
Yeah, South Hadley isn't Whip City. They're fiber
That's
sun.
Westfield.
Yeah. Whip City is Westfield. They're not our provider.
Oh, okay.
But
They,
yeah,
they put up
our
our network then. They did something.
yeah. Yeah, they're involved in the beginning, and they also administrate our CAF2 funding. Because we started working with them and then moved providers for financial reasons, which was a great move. But we're still kind of attached to them. They have no bearing on how much our ISP cost is, though.
Okay. And what's the deductible on the insurance now?
25.
Up until Thursday, it'll be 15 grand, and it's going up to 25 grand. That is our only option.
No, I understand. So it's going to 25 from 15. I just want to get that for the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Jim?
Yeah, Gail, you might want to let them know, or all of us know, about how National Grid and their upgrade, their three-phase upgrade, cost us almost $200,000, which we were unable to get any reimbursement for from various state organizations. That was a huge cost this year that we never could have planned for, at least 3 years ago.
Yeah, that it came completely out of the blue. We expected storms, we expected things happening. We never expected something like a phase 3 power upgrade on 6 miles of roads that, like Jim said, cost nearly $200,000, which is it's not an insurance triggered event, right? It's just normal maintenance. But yeah, not something we're expecting. Thank goodness we had big reserves to cover that.
What was our cost? The moving of the wires?
Yeah, so if you remember going down Wendell Road, going down Locks Pond Road, basically all the way from the center of town down to Lake Wyola, the power company put in taller utility poles and put in 3-phase power when it was only 2. 3-phase just means that there's arms on the utility poles, and they're taller. And because of that, we had to move all of our equipment to the new poles
At our expense.
at our expense. And this is what the utilities do. They charge all third-party attachers. We rent space on their utility poles, and it's up to third-party attachers to make those moves at their own expense. We tried mightily to have that covered through various grants. We contacted senators. We got our Congress people, seeing if there was any money to help municipalities with this kind of expense, and we came up with nothing. We asked everybody we could.
Steve?
Yeah, just want to mention on the insurance deductible, 2 short years ago, our deductible was $10,000 per storm. And that really helped a couple years ago when we had a couple bad storms, and we had costs of storm costs $27,000. I think we only paid 10, we got $17,000 back. Last year they wanted to bump it to from 10,000 to 25,000. We negotiated it, got it back to 15,000 for last year. That was with Mia. This year they wanted to go to 100,000. They did go to 100,000. That's why Gail worked really fast there, got connected with PERMA, got this at 25,000. Looking forward, it's what's happening with the casualty insurance nationwide due to all the natural disasters that are happening. We're not sure long term if we'll be able to get insurance. We may have to self-insure. We just don't know what's going to happen there. $100,000 deductible per storm is not very useful to us. The very few incidents that could happen that might yield a single storm damage greater than that. because of this, we realize the need, we're seeing the need to increase our reserves. We had, as been said, these excellent reserves set aside. Then with this hit we took from that National Grid pole transfer that, knocked our reserves way down, that's why we're saying we've got to start building it back up. So that's one of the reasons for our rate increase.
Susie.
So are your reserves listed on line 22? Is that where that is? Is that the reserve balance?
That is the reserve balance, but we also have, we also have this year's reserve that will carry forward.
That's the
and
addition.
in addition, yes, in addition, every year we have run in the past, a positive. We have retained earnings left over, at the end of the year that get applied to, I don't know what to call it, an emergency reserve, kind of these funds that we keep rolling over in the background, in the form of retained earnings. So I'm expecting those to be close to around 50,000. It's hard to say. We still have storms left. We still have 3 months left, but if everything goes well, we are going to have a surplus this year. So what you see here is not it.
I can just go back and respond to that a little bit. That, yes, Gail mentioned the retained earnings. That's as an enterprise fund, at the end of the fiscal year, any revenues we have in excess of expenses, we retain. It doesn't go back into the general fund as it would with a regular town department. It goes into sort of limbo for a few months, and the DOR certifies it at the same time they certify the town's free cash. And then that money, those retained earnings are available to us, although we have to have a town meeting vote to appropriate them, which I call reappropriating, since it was money that already had been appropriated. And so that's what Gail mentioned, that we're projecting maybe 50,000 this year. You don't know till the end of the year when you see just exactly what you had to spend. And so that's how our reserves will build up. What is it, $12,000 there? That's a budgeted reserve that we budget as actually part of our annual budget, but the reserves are greater than that because of the retained earnings.
How are you able to, you didn't tap into those retained earnings to deal with this national grid?
Well, you bet we
Yes.
did.
Oh, you did? Oh, you did? Okay.
You bet we
I
did.
don't- Was there a town meeting warrant article that I'm just
The
totally forgetting about?
January
Yeah.
special
Okay,
town
okay.
meeting back in
A year ago.
Oh,
a year
okay,
ago,
that's right.
we had a
Okay, got it.
huge appropriation
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that.
Okay, now
Yeah,
I'm
and we,
remembering. Right.
yeah, and we knew this bill
Mhm.
was coming, right? We knew,
Yeah.
we knew that we were going to have to pay for that poll work. So we said, okay, we need to make sure to reappropriate all of this reserve money we have to pay for it, and we did.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thanks. Bob.
Yeah, I guess I direct this to Steve. Have you put any thought into how much money you would need in a reserve account to self-insure? And are you heading in that direction as a contingency here with your plan?
Yeah, we don't have a figure yet. We just got, Gail, when was it, just like less than 2 weeks ago that you found out what was happening with the MIA insurance?
Yeah, and I can answer this. So to self-insure, you have to look at two things. You have to look at our distribution network that runs along the roadways, and then all the drops to each of the homes. And right now we have a $2 million sub limit. And I've done out the calculations. We can almost rebuild the whole network for that. And so I think it's enough insurance. So if we were to self-insure, I would like to see us probably get over close to $1 million. Honestly, if we're gonna do that, I'm thinking worst case catastrophe, something like a huge earthquake, forest fires, a tornado that comes and takes out all or most of our network. One of the advantages we have, sometimes a disadvantage, is that we have 42 miles of network just all over, spread out. So in some ways that's kind of a protection. You'd have to have a really bad, horrible thing happen. It's not like a building in one place where, a fire could take all that out. It's spread out over all this mileage. So it's a guesstimate when you talk about self-insuring of how much you need. But I'd like to see about $1 million if we were to go that route. So it's going to take a long time to get there.
Yeah, I guess I think it's a appealing idea to self-insure because I think there's a lot of risk involved in staying in using insurance companies right now too.
Yeah, we'll ride it out until it becomes untenable.
Yeah.
Like Steve said, it's like 100,000 deductible. That's like that. It's almost no insurance. It doesn't help.
Exactly.
It doesn't help when a storm comes. You're going to pay
No, it
for it
doesn't.
anyway.
Most probable events are not going to be covered.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus we have in Asheville.
Susie.
And Gail, do you know if there's any limitation about self-insuring when you're a municipal enterprise?
I do not, Susie. That's a great question. Yeah, I don't know if there is any rules against it. So well, yeah, we should look into that. As far as I know, I've never heard of anything, but we should look into it.
This is definitely an evolving process with us. So.
Mm. Gail, I have one last question for you. I know I can see from your budget that you have kind of built in this plan to replace and upgrade the electronics after a 7 to 10 year period when that equipment's going to be obsolete. Is there a kind of similar plan in place for the main sort of infrastructure, like the actual fiber itself? Like, is there a certain sort of time frame that we as a town can expect to rely on that sort of main infrastructure for? If is there like, yeah, and if there is a certain point at which we can expect that we're going to need to actually replace the network, I mean, I imagine that's a huge cost. So can you talk a little bit about sort of how you guys are thinking about that issue?
Yeah, we should start worrying about that about 20 years in.
Okay.
But it's going to be another 20 before we're going to have to replace things on any widespread way. Fiber is remarkably sturdy, and the lifespan on it is 35 to 50 years. It's amazing stuff.
Got it.
And even when the thing that breaks down the most is the insulating covering around the fiber insides, which is actually like solid glass. So it's yeah, it's really
Okay.
really sturdy. It's sturdier than traditional telephone lines. And think about our analog copper wires that have been up there since 1920.
Yeah. Okay, super helpful. All right. Thanks, George.
Final question. I wanted to go back to the $5,000 eliminating it looks like you're eliminating subscriber support of $5,000. What was that about again?
Yeah. So that's to help families in need pay for fiber. It's not eliminated, it's just moved down.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't know if you remember during town meeting in this past June, there's a kerfuffle about our budget, and we had to like hold everything, and I had to talk with Gail, Gail, our accountant, about how we represented this. And you can't have a positive income on your debit side. And so we moved this down where our MLP fee is just reduced by a subscriber amount because we're
Oh, I
collecting.
see it.
Yeah,
Got it.
see how we're collecting that
Got it.
less amount. So right now there's about 20 families who are receiving this. And we are going to obviously continue that. We might even raise it a little bit, keep it at 5,000, but just allocate how much we're giving to each family a little bit higher in light of these rate raises. But we're not going to decide that till the end of this fiscal year.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Gail and Steve.
Thank you.
That was
Okay,
super
welcome.
informative.
Thank you, as always, for your support. I hope that the rest of the budget talks go well. I know it's a very, very challenging year for all of us.
Sure is. All right, thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
All right,
care.
all right, take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Let's see. All right. So I think I don't see them yet, but I think Jeremy and possibly Nate from the school committee are going to join us in a few minutes to talk about a FinCom reserve request. But while we're waiting for them, Gabe, you had a couple of topics, or at least one, that you wanted to run by us,
Right.
related to planning for kind of PFAS expenses. Let's take a few minutes now to chat about that.
Okay, so PFAS, we're gonna run out of PFAS money here pretty soon. There's one thing I need to figure out, and that's if Ty and Bond is done with one of their contracts. But our PFAS expenses run about $5,000 for testing alone every quarter, is what I've figured out. It's $267 per household. And that doesn't include a new household or POET system or any of that. So I was trying to figure out, that's about $20,000 a year just in testing. So I was trying to figure out how to fund PFAS without impacting our budget in a negative way. And because there's so many unknowns to the whole thing. So there is another line also in your budget for the fire station gas spill. And I think there's two lines there. And one's around 10,000 and I can't remember what the other one's for. But my concern there is I'm actually thinking we should blend both of those into one article and take some money out of free cash and set that aside until we get a better handle on what the cost of PFAS is going to be. So I'm proposing that we do an article between $50,000 and $70,000. The reason that would work well is if we didn't use it this year, it would carry over to next year, and you would start to control your PFAS expenses. We can lowball it, but the problem with lowballing it is then you have to go to reserve fund transfer, which I don't like to do. And ask for money, which I'm going to have to do this spring in order to keep paying these testing bills. So that's kind of just, I'm throwing that out there for consideration. I don't know if you've thought about how to pay for PFAS. I know we have a borrowing going through, but these are permanent costs that we have to figure out how to sustain. You can't keep borrowing it. So I don't know how we're going to figure all of that out.
Susie.
The costs you were referring to for the fire station are not for PFAS, they're for the gas spill.
Yep.
And there's two lines, and 130 5 for 5,000, that is for the testing and reports. And I look back in my notes from last year, and the line 136, which is also 5,000, was for the steps for mitigation that were being taken. And the gas bill as an issue came back up during one of those testing rounds where they said, yep, there's still some stuff to remediate. So those we might choose to continue to get the tests for the gas checked out and figured out what is the remediation, but that's not connected to PFAS. I agree that we need to have a PFAS funding line. And yes, we have not figured that out in all of this time so far. We just did the borrowing because Clean Water Trust did a 0 interest loan for us.
Right, which made absolute perfect sense. My proposal was actually to combine the two, so you had one line item, but if you want to keep them separate, that's certainly understandable.
Yeah, I think
You would
we-
have a fire station, testing and mitigation article, and you could do it for 10,000 and set that aside, and then if nothing comes through on that this year, the money wouldn't be in place for next year, because eventually that's going to come back around to haunt you. And the PFAS line could be separate. The problem with that line is trying to figure out how much to put in it. I actually would propose that you put 50 in that to start with, and 10, separate them out if you want 2 articles for that. So that's my thought on that. I know free cash is the best place in my mind to tap
Gabe,
because it's one-time funding. PFAS is not going to be one-time funding, but until we get a better handle on it, until it stops having new houses being added to it, I think it's a better idea to set that capital expense aside for both issues, so that it doesn't impact your current struggles with trying to close the gap in the budget.
Gabe,
Again, sorry, just one clarifying question. So by both issues, you mean the PFAS and the fire station
And the DEP issue, yeah, with the fire
mitigation.
station.
Yeah, got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
I am
All right,
trying,
so-
I am trying to figure, we are actually, trying to figure out where that is currently.
Yeah.
So I did contact Ty and Bond today to see if they had any history on it, because we couldn't find any history on it in the files. I have not heard back from them, but I'll keep you apprised of what happens as the information comes in.
Okay.
That's the 10,000 I'm talking about.
Right. Okay, so we got a couple of questions here. Let's go to April and then George.
Yeah, well, one thing is I do not remember, I was on the select board during all of that, the mitigation when that was first found. And it wasn't Ty and Bond, and I'm having a blank about who it was. It was another Springfield firm that we worked with. And I will look through my records. I
think
just
that
don't
was
remember.
OTO.
Yes,
But
Yes.
but I looked back in the minutes, and the last round for the gas mitigation went to Tig and Bond.
Okay. Okay, the other question I had in terms of the PFAS is how is it being determined where and how to test? You know, I'm thinking everybody downstream,
Right.
downhill,
So
but
it's-
how is that being determined? Do we have, an expert trying to track it in some way?
We actually do have an expert tracking it. We have Ty and Bond is doing that with their engineering. And then we have a company called Pace Analytical that does the testing. So what'll happen is the houses have been identified, and then within 500 feet of each house, you have to test the next houses beside them. And you have to keep monitoring that in case it spreads. Because my understanding, and I've had a short course in PFAS starting in November, so I'm not all inclusive in my knowledge, but the PFAS, the water, it moves. And I'll use the church as an example. It tested negative for PFAS for a couple of tests, and then all of a sudden it tested positive. So when the water moves and it tests positive, you have to respond with the water that you supply them and then installing the POET system. But then you have to test the other houses around it within 500 feet. because it might have spread in that direction. Some of those houses may already be part of the testing process, and some of them may be new. So if one 500 feet from the church tests positive, then you have to go 500 feet from that house
Mm,
and keep going around. So the map keeps growing and growing. And that's just the short explanation. And it's
Got it.
297 or 276 for each test.
And the 50K proposal is
It's a
expected
shot
to
in
kind
the
of,
dark. Yes.
yeah, but in theory, that could cover the costs of the required testing for a
Right.
year. Yeah,
Or two. So
okay.
what I see, your history now is you guys have gone through $300,000 in the last couple of years.
Hmm.
So it's hard for me to say, oh, if I say 50 and all of a sudden you need 100, you're going to have a
Mhm.
special town meeting.
Yeah.
So I've identified the testing right now to be costing you about 20,000 a year, not including
Mhm.
new homes.
Hmm.
So if we put 50 aside, that gives you 2 years worth of testing
Got it.
plus new home stuff. If you want to start out smaller than that, that's a risk we can take, knowing that if all of a sudden we have an explosion of houses, we're going to have more money.
Hmm. Yeah.
And those are good points. I mean, we could start off smaller. I just like to, I don't know, I really feel
Mhm.
more comfortable with a little more money in there in an article that you don't use. And if you have another bad fiscal year, you don't have to worry about that.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, Bob.
Yeah, Gabe, I like the idea of separating the two accounts, but I wanted to ask a question or make a point, which is that we've been borrowing this money, and as far as I understand it, there have been interest-free loans, and there's been a chance, or at least it was suggested, that some of that loan might be forgiven. So I don't have a problem with funding, this problem, through our reserves. But if we can get money interest-free when we're getting interest on our reserves, and we might have part of that loan forgiven, why wouldn't we do that?
We would do that, but the problem is now there are multiple towns lining up for the same pot of money
Mhm.
from the
Hmm.
water pollution people, the clean water people. And the state is going to have to figure out how to fund all of this. If we put it in a reserve, you're still going to earn interest on that because it's going to sit in an account waiting to be spent, earning interest. If we can continue to try to apply for the loans, you spend the loan money first and you leave your article alone and you don't spend that. So you haven't spent the money. You just set it aside like a stabilization account earmarked for PFAS. So you should consider borrowing more all along. And we have had that conversation with the Clean Water Trust. Right now, we have not even completed the first borrowing, and that has to be done by June 30th. So they're asking us 100 million questions. Ty and Bond keeps answering them, and hopefully they will forgive the loan. So you're absolutely right, Bob. The more we can get from them, the better off we are.
That makes sense. So is Ty and Bond handling this loan application for us?
No, well, Ty and Bond answers the questions. They just gave me a whole answer to a whole bunch of loan questionnaire questions. But Ty and Bond is not cheap. Their contract, we're on the second contract with them, and this second contract was $98,000.
So, but then could we handle the paperwork? Is that something we should be able to do?
I think we can handle the paperwork. I don't know if we can handle the tracking with all the houses and all the testing because they send reports out and then we have to send letters out to every household every time we have a report. It's really pretty complicated.
Yep.
And I don't know, once we run out of Ty and Bond money, right now they have a balance of 78,000 off of that $98,000 contract. So I'm hoping that'll carry you through next year and you won't need more money to pay them. But it's a guess.
Yep.
There is no we are kind of the test person here because we're the ones in this area with the biggest problem. New Salem is just discovering their problem. And so and I don't know if Leverett I don't know if anybody else is running into this with their landfills and all of that. We have a lot of houses.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Susan,
maybe we'll benefit from this in some way, hopefully,
Yeah.
by being number one, by being ahead of everybody else.
Well, I think we are because if the loan forgiveness comes through, we may, because we're in it in the beginning, they may not be able to do loan forgiveness in the future if they have too many people.
Mhm.
It's a national problem.
So the costs are not only the testing, at some point, there's going to be filters replaced, which is both labor and materials. And we don't I don't know what they think you do with the filter when you take it out, throw it in the dump. So there's other expenses. And because we are at the beginning of this process, we can't know. So I think 50,000 is not too big. I don't know whether it would last for 2 years with the $20,000 a year testing. And I think in the process so far, they changed some of the testing rules. Like if it's a no detection, you still had to go back and test them again because of the way PFAS moves. And so the regime of testing hasn't been fixed yet. And as other towns begin to notice the problem, I imagine the whole structure of testing will change. I don't know when the filter life is, if it's out there yet, if we know what that is, but we have put filters in and now I think they're 2 years old.
Okay, so let me go to George. And then we'll wrap this
So
topic up.
you said that we haven't drawn down all the loans. How much do we still have available?
We have no money available from the loans. We're down to $21,000. And I'm putting 5,000 through this week.
You mean 21,000 of what we borrowed, we just haven't used.
Right.
Okay, all right. But
We have $100,000 balance in the bank right now. We have 78,000 of that 100,000 is committed to tie and bond.
Right.
So we can't spend out of that 100,000 because we signed a contract and that money has to be set aside.
okay.
And so that leaves us with 21,000. And like I said, I'm putting 5,000 through this week.
And the question I wanted the reason I raised my hand was, are we really testing quarterly?
They're testing, I'm getting bills. I thought each house was tested quarterly. I could be wrong, George. I can check with Ty and Bond on that. I know that we get different. When I started here, we had a whole bunch of testing that had been done and we needed to send letters out to all these houses. And that was due like September 30th and we were way behind in getting it done. So we got it done. Now we are ongoing getting testing results and sending letters out to other houses as they move along. So I can ask Ty and Bond that question for you. I don't know if a certain house has a high result, they get tested more often.
Well, that certainly affects the numbers.
Right.
Yeah, I can tell you the last time my house was tested was October. And the time before that was in the spring. And so in 24, I was only tested twice.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm pretty sure I know that's the case. And I'm wondering why quarterly? I mean, maybe there's a standard that says it has to be quarterly. That seems awfully short to me.
I think
that
I'm not
seems a little too
sure.
frequent to me.
I think
Right.
that's DEP, and that is one of the lines that changed last year. So it's going to be hard to know for sure. Plus, we had the change in administration. It's going to be hard to know what it's supposed to be now. And using your own personal history might not indicate that. And I remember Becky, I must have, I don't know if it was at a FinCom meeting or a select board meeting, talking about the changes and the way it was going to cost more because of the changes in the thresholds of testing.
And I don't know why I have quarterly in my head, except somebody told me that, and my hunch is it's Ty and Bond.
Yeah,
Because they're the people that have taught me everything I know right now.
I think in the beginning we were told it was going to be quarterly. I'm just, observing from my place that
Yeah.
that hasn't been happening. And I also question, if it's DEP standard, then we have no say. But it seems to me every 4 months 3 months is a little too frequent.
That is DEP stuff. All of
Yeah,
these
okay.
regulations are coming from DEP, not Tig and Bond, and not our own wishes.
Yep. That makes total sense.
Okay. All right. Gabe, thanks because we've been kind of kicking the can on this, and there's even a placeholder in our budget for PFAS mitigation, and so we've got a number on the table, so we'll have some discussion amongst FinCom about whether that feels like the right amount to set aside and whether it ought to come from free cash. So thanks for getting the conversation started on that. I'm going to switch gears because we have Jeremy from the school committee. And Jeremy, I forwarded your email for the rest of the committee, but why don't you bring us up to speed? This is a FinCom reserve request for kind of an urgent spending issue.
Yeah, so I just will say too, like on the school committee, we don't have a whole lot of institutional memory. So like these processes are all new to all of us. But we were in a negotiation year this year. We had to finish the contracts. We already know that we need to come up with some money at the end here, probably to fund our budget. And we were hopeful that there'd be some savings here or there. But what came out at the last meeting from the finance director was that the school needs they're about 10,000 short of fuel oil because of how cold it has been this winter. And there's also this need also tied in with the ventilation and heating where they need some sort of antifreeze. The best that I understand it is outside of the school, there's an elbow that comes out of one of the heating units and goes around. And we were supposed to be at a certain efficiency coming out of COVID. And my understanding is somehow this pipe affects the efficiency of the heating system. But the other problem is if it were to freeze, which it has, I guess, in the past at some point, if it were to freeze, it could result in a $10,000 bill to like fix the ventilation system again. So we tried to put that before the capital planning committee, but because we need antifreeze and it's a liquid and it's consumable, it can't be funded under capital planning. So those are the two things. The fuel oil, 10,000. I believe the antifreeze is around 6,000. But those two things are kind of urgent and we need to find funding for them.
Okay. I'm trying to remember if we bumped the fuel line in our FY25 budget. Did we increase that from FY24?
I would have to look back. I think if I remember correctly, Caitlin said it was based on the current contract that they had, the new contract going forward, but I'm not positive. I'd have to look at that.
All right. Jim.
Yes. The antifreeze, this is what I'm concerned about. Putting antifreeze into a hydronic system, which is what that's how the school heats itself, is a pretty delicate task, and you can't kind of localize it to this one area. The whole system has to be antifreeze has to be brought into the whole system, and doing it at this time of year, and the chances of things going wrong, I think are pretty serious. Are you sure you just can't wait on this until warmer weather or in the summertime, which is when it's best to do this kind of thing?
So, Jim, I totally hear that. That's outside of my realm. I've been led to believe by both the principal, superintendent, and I assume the custodial staff that this is something that was really pressing. It's been something that's been mentioned the last couple of times, not the funding of it, but the idea of asking for it through capital planning. I can definitely ask that question and get back to you on it. I would be happy to do that. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know if Gabe does. I just saw Gabe's hand came up. I don't know if she knows more.
Yeah, Gabe.
But that's the best about that.
I don't really know more, but my question is, do you have any E&D right now that you could transfer out?
Can you remind me what an END is?
It's your excess, it's your free cash. Every school should have E&D.
School districts have
again,
it.
like again,
Never seen it.
okay.
I think
Yeah,
E&Ds, aren't they just school districts? Not necessarily
A town
local.
Individual
school.
schools.
Yeah, I think that's a school district thing. Like we know that
Yeah.
the regional school has an E&D.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I've never seen it for
So
the
you
local.
don't have one in your town, okay.
No, not in the town. That's
I
really what
was saying,
FinCom.
that's absolutely the first time I've heard about it. So I was
Well, that's
really
why, well, I'm used to Swift River, and you're right, they are a school district between Wendell and New Salem, and that's why they have E&D. We always use them for these kinds of emergencies, that's why I wondered. So
We
you
might.
don't have that, okay.
No.
Susie?
And the fuel in FY 24 was allocated 35,000. The actual came in at 39,800. And then for FY 25, we went back to 35. So it's pretty likely, both with the really cold temperatures and the fact that it fell short in 24, that we're in this position now.
Mhm.
10,000 needed.
Okay.
another
So
reason
did
why
did we level fund that for FY 26, or I think we did increase it, didn't we?
No, she locked in her price for
Right.
Okay, yeah.
26 coming up, and it's listed at, I think, 30.
Okay.
Yeah, 30.
Right.
And it's going to be warmer because of climate change, okay?
Yeah, well,
sounds like
All right.
fun.
Mhm. So
Um,
yeah, Jeremy.
no, I was just gonna say, I feel like, the antifreeze question that Jim brought up is something that I really that makes some sense to me just anecdotally. I'd love to get an answer to that as far as the antifreeze
Yeah.
goes.
I think we have two options. One is to vote on a FinCom reserve transfer for the heating fuel portion of what is being asked for here, and then maybe tabling the antifreeze until we have more information. I think that would be option one, or option two is we can proceed with a vote on the full request, which I think you said it was 10,000 for heating
10,000
fuel and 6 for
6,000, I believe, for the antifreeze. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So I don't know if FinCom members have a strong feeling one way or the other. Susie?
In listening to the school, which is Anne talking to the people about the antifreeze, they are not recommending to wait. It
Okay.
would be done by a company. It's not done by the principal. So
custodian, yeah.
I feel like they flagged this as an issue. And it has to do with a system that is vulnerable. So my feeling is that if it's done by a professional, then we should go ahead and do this.
All right. Jim?
I would, professional or not, I would wait until the summertime to do this and get some opinions on this. Reloading a hydronic heating system with antifreeze is a difficult task, and doing it during this cold snap that we're doing right now is troublesome. Just keep the circulators working and running, and before, so we can get through this cold season. And I think we ought to separate the two issues of the heating oil and the antifreeze until we know a little bit more about the antifreeze situation.
The other thing that the principal said is that the fact that the antifreeze is low is making the air circulation system not efficient, and we're in the cold and flu and fresh air need time. So that she was
She said 20, she was operating at like 20% efficiency right now, which
Right.
was the problem. And post-COVID guidelines are higher than that.
right. They're not meeting the guidelines of fresh air.
But when you
Bob?
put in,
Hello, may I speak?
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
From what I've heard from the school committee, it doesn't seem altogether certain that this is a recharge of the antifreeze in the hydronic system, Jim, as you have assumed. Seems to me this has something to do with the ventilation system. It's not clear to me that we understand what that might be, but it has to do with ventilation, not heat. So it's some unit that's a transfer, heat transfer unit that's outside for whatever reason, probably because it can cool off the coolant that it needs to be antifreeze, but not related to the heating system per se.
no.
But what
So
you think
it's-
it is, Jim. So,
So it's
I would
segregated.
like to know what it is, but
Yeah,
you're not going to be
I-
able to tell us, I'm sure. So I don't see whether and I don't have any information to ascertain whether this is so urgent that we couldn't wait 2 weeks to do this. I would suggest that we make a motion to approve the $10,000 for heating oil and make the second motion conditional on getting more information to the committee, and then sort of vote on it now, but we'll wait till this information is provided before we let that money be transferred. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I would be happy to take that on this week. I only just came to understand even the fact that it was like an external pipe. Like that is very new information to me. This is something that's been being kind of kicked around for a little while. But I am happy to get the clarification on exactly how the system, what the system is, what the piece is, why it needs antifreeze. I can get you those answers. I'll try to do that by the end of the week for you.
Good.
That seems relevant.
Okay, April?
I don't feel comfortable second guessing the people that the principal has, has working on this. And given the state of the weather right now, and the ventilation in the school, I would really rather just go ahead with a $16,000 transfer and get it done. That would be my preference.
I agree with that.
Well, I think one option is for us to approve the $16,000 tonight, but ask Jeremy to gather some additional information for us. Maybe relay some of the kind of questions that have come up tonight, and just sort of ask you to sort of play that role in terms of just expressing that interest in getting some more information about it. I mean, I think that from my vantage point, that might be the best way to proceed. George?
I have detailed notes on Jim's questions.
Right. Good.
Well, I have one. I have an alternative. This would be a $16,000 transfer to the school, elementary school line, and they have adequate funds to pay the $6,000 now. If it really is an emergency, they should go ahead and do the work. And as I heard earlier, we talked about passing a FinCom reserve transfer contingent on that need. If they really need it, they should spend it, give us the answer, and we can make a $6,000 transfer in our next meeting. The reality is they have the money now. It sounds to me like it's urgent. I tend to agree with April anyways. We have experts, we have people who have studied this and know, and I assume it's the HVAC contractor that's telling us to do this. But in the meantime, if we're really unsure, let's pass the 10,000, tell the school to spend the 6,000 if it's urgent, and we will definitely make a $6,000 transfer. Everybody here is on board with that. So I'm just throwing out an alternative. I'm not married to the 16.
Yeah. All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
I make
I'd
a
go-
motion that we transfer 16,000 to the school budget and they will get back to us with information about details on the antifreeze.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All
Yeah, I
right,
just want to say,
Bob?
I want to say, look, I'd be the last person to deprive the school of heating oil during this kind of weather. But I do think we've raised legitimate questions about the need for the 6,000. George pointed out that the school has the money. We can pass the second part contingent on getting this information. I don't have a problem with that. I would like to separate the two. I would like to transfer the 10,000 and then make the 6,000 contingent on our being provided with that information. And as far as the idea of we don't have the right to question or to doubt, or that's our job. It's our job to ask questions. And so it's not that we distrust the school or distrust Jeremy or the principal or anyone else, but we want to see why this money is being spent. That's our job, to ask questions. So I have no problem with that. I make no apologies about asking questions. And Jeremy has shown himself very willing to get the answers for us. So let's go with a contingency on the 6,000. That's my hope.
I would second that.
All right, so we have a motion.
Perfectly reasonable.
So let's deal with this motion that's on the floor now. It's been seconded. Been some discussion. So why don't we vote on this existing motion? If it fails, we can go to we can entertain a new motion. George?
Nay. Arvanitis, nay.
Groves, nay.
Hemingway, nay.
Cashew, yes.
Mosier, yes.
Stein, aye. Are we
Where's
tied?
Kathy.
Kathy's
All
not
right,
here.
So that,
Let's
all
call her
right, so
in.
that that motion fails. So Bob, I would look to you to make another motion now based
First
on
motion
your.
I'll make is that we approve $10,000 transfer to the school to provide them with more heating oil.
Okay. I'll second that. Any other discussion?
I thought we were going to make it contingent to say that there would be some response for the 6,000 contingent.
That would be a
on
separate motion in
information.
my mind. So I'm making a motion that we provide 10,000 for heating oil.
Yeah.
Which I think is not controversial here. So we could just pass that, then we could pass a separate motion. That's the way I'm thinking about this.
Okay, so we've got a motion to transfer $10,000 the heating for heating oil. I seconded the motion. Any other discussion? George?
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, yes.
Mosier, aye.
And Stein, aye.
Okay. So that motion has been approved. We're gonna transfer $10,000 from FinCom reserves to the elementary school line. And then is there another motion that somebody wants to make?
Well, let me just ask a question here now. Should we pass the motion now, or should we wait till we get the information and pass it at our next, or vote on it at our next meeting? Is that would make sense to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
So
Okay, yeah, go
I
ahead.
will,
Susie, do you want to?
I feel
I'll
like
make up the
there's
transfer.
so much bureaucracy and we have a lot to do. We have a lot ahead of us. So I would make a motion that we go ahead and vote for the 6,000 now, contingent on getting the information that answers the question. Just a separate.
Can we make a FinCom transfer contingent on something in the future, or don't we typically get the information and then make the FinCom
Yeah, I
transfer?
think that's probably the right sequence.
I mean, if we're gonna wait 2 weeks, what's the difference?
Right.
I mean, everybody here will support it when they come back and give us the information that I'm sure they're gonna give us. So what's the difference?
The only other piece of the discussion that I heard was that it did freeze, it did cost $10,000 to fix it. And now we're here and we need to do this, but I'm not clear on that. But
Yeah.
to me, the discussion that I heard from the financial director and the principal showed that there'd be consequences if it doesn't get fixed.
Right. So here's what I think, what I'm hearing is, Jeremy, I think there's a few things to be helpful if you conveyed. One is there's clearly a desire to support whatever the school needs to do here, right? So I think there's just a little bit of discomfort with some members about the lack of understanding on kind of what the issue is and what. So if you can communicate to the school committee, the principal, that there's a willingness to help out with this other antifreeze issue, just bring us some additional information.
And what I heard, I think it was George that said it, but I feel
Yeah.
like it's totally, the money is in there, and if there's any way, I mean, if they can, I'm sure that we can fund it to get it done right now if it needs to be done, knowing that we can come back and get money. I feel like everyone in this situation is comfortable with that arrangement. But I will, like I said, I'm going to try to get you those answers by Friday, so you should know that by then.
All right. Appreciate it. Okay.
No problem.
Thanks, Jeremy. So I think we can move on to. Yeah, thanks for bringing this to us. All right, sounds good. All right. Next up is actually a new topic that I don't think is on the original agenda, but we're adding last minute, which is I've asked Ryan, our town's treasurer, to join us for a discussion about our kind of debt service capital planning schedule. So I think George in particular, I think both at our last meeting and in an email he sent to me, sort of raised the question of whether there might be some value in making additional, using capital stabilization funds to make some additional debt service payments for the 3 projects that we're currently borrowing for. And I think that's the culvert project, the backhoe, and what was the third one? I can't remember now.
The truck.
The
Highway
truck.
truck.
That's right. The highway truck. Okay. So Ryan, can you kind of give us just kind of an overview on sort of what the current status and kind of what's being recommended right now in terms of what payments we're going to be making for FY26?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, the town of Shutesbury has a ban, which is a 1-year borrowing. It's maturing in May, and included in that ban are those 3 projects. They're all lumped under one borrowing, but itemized so you can see the breakdown of them. So you've got your culvert project, your dump truck, and your backhoe all renewing, and we will be renewing them for the FY26 fiscal year. And I think that it's wise to budget for FY26 some principal pay downs so that we don't see the town stuck with the financial burden, near the end of this. So your dump truck and your backhoe, for example, under Mass General Law, you have 5 years of use is what they believe the life is on those. I recognize that most municipalities get a lot more use out of it, but Mass General Law says that's their use. So you only have 5 years to pay that debt off. So every year that the town doesn't put a principal pay down in effect, they're just putting it off until that final year. So I did recommend for the FY26 budget that you do a 1/4 principal pay down on those projects. And I would recommend that most likely again next year as well, and each year for the remaining 4 years, so that it is paid off at the end of the 5-year renewal term here.
And what's the dollar amount on that 1/4?
We'd be looking at $93,180. $81.28.
Okay. And what's the interest payment that we're making for FY26?
The interest payment is higher than that. Not higher than that, but it's very close to that. And you want to keep in mind that's because we'll be making an interest payment on the library project as well. So it seems like there's a wide disparagement because the interest that we're estimating is $83,991.06.
All right. George, did you want to?
Yeah, you want me to schedule?
Yeah, let's do that.
So I just one quick question, Ryan, just for the minutes. So when you have, if you're running bands like these before you start the debt service, then we're shortening the amount of the life of the bond when we issue it. Is that correct?
Even if we did if you did a serial note, you still can only borrow for 5 years on the equipment because Mass General says that's their use of life. So it doesn't matter. The benefit of doing the bands is that you get to take the borrowing at hopefully, and what we have done, at a lesser interest rate each year. So, if last year I had done, a serial note borrowing for those, we probably would have been looking at a 6% interest rate, and that would be it. And you now also be then set at that 6% for each one of these 5 years. And instead, we came in at 4.6%. So we save an interest just this year, and most likely we will save again this year. It's on track. Short-term rates have been on the decline.
I understand that, but my question is, if we do two bands, we're basically pushing back the debt service, the bond, the serial bond, 2 years. We can run a 5-year bond starting after 2 years. It doesn't have to be a 3-year bond for the 5-year rule.
No.
Okay. All right.
No, sorry, I didn't follow them.
No, that's okay. I'm
No,
not
you
sure. I
only
didn't fully
have
understand.
you only
So
get
the 5 years, so
total.
we're fine. We can have regular debt service, 5 smooth principal payments after the 2 years. Okay. So you want me to share?
No.
You can only make 5 principal pay. You only have 5 years total, starting from day
Okay,
one.
so that's the point. So
From
if
year
we
one.
so if we do bands for 2 years, then when we issue the bond, it's going to be a 3-year bond.
Yeah, if we even get to that point, yes.
Yeah, I'm just saying, theoretically, the way it works.
Yeah.
Our intention was to borrow. We're delaying the actual payment of principal and locking into a rate. So by using the bands, so when we lock into
No, we're not delaying the finance. You have the choice to pay your principal. If you choose not to, then you're delaying. But what I'm saying is you need to I'm telling you,
you're
the
recommending
finance
it.
should make
we
this
should have made
principal payment.
Then we should have made principal.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, why didn't we make a principal payment last year then?
That was I'm going to use the word conversation between the previous town administrator and I. That didn't go well.
Okay.
The focus has been to reduce the tax rate for a while in the town, and in order to do that, you're not spending money. It's that simple.
But for future planning, just so we fully understand this, when we issue a bond, we can still make principal payments. Oh, whoa, yeah, geez, we should be.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. This is new to me. That's all new to me.
Got you. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah.
No, you were, Ryan. Now I get it.
Hi, Ryan. I wanted to ask you a question. Why would we pay interest? We pay that out of the budget. Is that true?
Technically, the finance. So basically, the treasurer is in charge of your debt, and I can make recommendations on the debt, and I manage the debt. But the finance committee can determine how they choose to pay it. I mean, there's some things that you can't take money out of stabilization, et cetera. But it's wise practice to budget your debt just from your tax revenue. That's in my opinion, that's your best practice.
Well, see, here's what I'm driving at is, I know we're paying for the truck from a capital transfer. I believe we are. But if we paid off the principal we would be stopped paying the interest, obviously. And that would lower our tax liability on those items. So I would support that. Is that something you would entertain?
Oh yeah, I don't think if the town has the financial ability, like I said, the dump truck and the backhoe, you only get 5 years total. So it's not, the culvert, for example, is a 30-year project. So over time, spread out, you've got these two other pieces of equipment. One is as low as 120,000. I'm asking you to put 30 towards it, so it'll bring it down to 90. If you have the money to pay off the backhoe when we do the renewal next fiscal, next year, just budget for that. That would be my recommendation.
I agree with you. I think that's something that we have to look at. If you would go along with that, I think it's something we would seriously look at, because we have other obligations which are not going to be as easy to dispose of from reserves that are budgetary for continuous operating expenses.
Susie.
I just have a question about the timeline. I thought the truck did not get delivered to our
Purchase.
town for a whole year. So does that change the timeline on that 5 years?
It does not. It's based on the borrowing. So when the vote is done, it's within, Gabe might have to help me on that, but I think I had until like July. I think I had until June 30th of the year that it was delivered to borrow. And I believe it came in, I think it came in really late in the fiscal year last year, but I'd have to go back and check the actual date of delivery. But I know it was within the legal time frame that I had to do the borrowing, because that's what my financial advisor told me.
They definitely have the truck, if that's the question.
That wasn't the question. It was
You know,
just
I
the
saw it yesterday.
timeline for it, 5 years starting when?
When you borrow, the date of borrowing, it's 5 years from the date of borrowing. So Ryan is correct. It's from the date of borrowing, you have 5 years.
Mhm. All right. So to just to kind of recap, yeah, George, you're going to pull up the.
That's
So, Ryan, I don't know if you've seen this before. I'm sure you haven't. This is the model we use to kind of figure out how to manage, our stabilization and free cash funds, and to determine what's the best way to use them. If I show you FY25, it's probably confusing. Let me not. So I'm going to go to the bottom, and I'm going to show you, these are our current balances on the most recent accounting report for capital stabilization and stabilization. And then there was our certified free cash at the end of last fiscal year. Up here is a schedule of, these are the special town meeting from December. And these were all approved. So these were actual uses of free cash this year. And they're in the free cash column. They added up to 73,417, and they're being subtracted from our certified balance. So this is our new certified, this is our adjusted certified balance, I'll call it. So now we see what our reserves are at this point in time, 1.5 million, broken up between 3 different reserve accounts. And then what are we going to bring to the annual town meeting in the form of warrant articles? Those are going to be dropped in here to show us what our anticipated balances will be. This 86,000, let's ignore that for now. But when we look at these items, one of the things we can do is we could say, all right, let's, just for an example, let's pay off with stabilization funds the backhoe. And that would show up here, and then we can see what our balance is. So typically what we do is we tinker up here, we talk about some of our ideas and what makes the most sense. And then we look at what their impact is on our reserves and what our reserves as a percentage of our budget, because we try to keep it at certain levels. And so that's what the spreadsheet does. Down in this section, we would put in other things that we might spend. For instance, if we wanted, last year, we put quite a bit of money towards operating costs. We put $40,000 towards the elementary school for an outplacement. And so we could also put that here to also see what the impact of that would be. So we use it for capital planning, but we also take into account other things we might be doing. And also, I think everybody's aware, in our budget, there's 112,695, I believe it is, that we have in debt service every year. And we use that to cover debt service and to make a transfer to capital stabilization. So to the extent that we don't have debt service, in fact, I have a table here. Here it is right here. So our debt capacity in our budget for 10 years has been this dollar amount. And when we have debt service, we subtract that debt service out and we get an amount that is, we can still transfer to capital stabilization so that we have the 113,000 built into the budget. We're just distributing it across these four things as opposed to all of it to the transfer. And now, given what you said, probably what we're going to do is, if we don't pay down any of these balances on these loans right now, we're probably going to want to make our first principal payments on these. And if we do that, then I would put these in this column, and then that would show up over here. And the only thing is, this isn't right. Give me 1 second. That is right. What I want to do is take this and subtract this, and subtract that. That's how much we could transfer to stabilization. Now it's negative, which means that we've exceeded the amount, and this should be 0 if we do that. So I've got that piece here, depending on what we decide, because if we decide to do what I suggested earlier, and I'm not suggesting we do it, but if we did my example earlier, then we wouldn't need the interest, or we could get rid of those two things if we paid off the backhoe right now. So just to demonstrate how this spreadsheet works. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, and George, those debt service payments for specific projects are linked back to specific items in our expense budget, right? Like there's a dump truck.
Yes, they're in the debt service
yeah.
section. Yes.
Yeah, and you've
There's 6
got
lines.
yeah, and you put a placeholder in there for $56,250 for the truck, and yeah,
Well, I was going to say, if you look at the budget that Gay sent to us on Sunday,
yeah,
you will
yeah.
see that she has all 3 interest items and all 3, I can show you, and all
Yeah.
3 principal
payments.
Yeah, so they're in our budget, they are sitting
Right there.
right
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, you got it.
So
yeah.
these are here and those are here. Library doesn't count because it's debt excluded. And so
Yeah.
we set this to 0.
Yeah.
And you can
got it.
see some years we had no debt service. We transferred the full amount. Then we had some debt service and we lowered it. And that's where we were, and we lowered it a little last year. This year, if we do go ahead, then and put it all in there, then we wouldn't make a transfer. So yes.
Right. But I guess one thought then is, if we decide to use capital stabilization funds for some portion of those debt service payments, then we can take them out of our operating
Yes.
budget.
So if we paid off the backhoe and we just threw 120,000 at the backhoe from stabilization, then there'd be no debt service. Now our debt service is going to be the combination of these 2 items and these 2 items. That's $42,000.
So then we can add we can do.
That's not 42,000, right? That's more like, I don't know, call that 90,000. And that means we'd still be able to transfer 30.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
So can I throw a wrench in this a little bit?
Yeah.
All right. I think you're earning more money in interest right now if Ryan has his stabilizations in Bartholomew.
I do. Sorry.
And so Bartholomew, I don't know what your rate was, but it's been averaging 5% or a little more than that.
Yeah, we've been right around
And
there.
your loan is only 4%.
4.9.
So You need to
Yeah.
make sure that you are not giving up interest earnings that are more
Right.
than what you're paying out in debt.
Mhm.
Gabe, can I just remove that wrench, please? I think that the spread between those two rates is close enough to it's offset easily by our budget concerns. That's my own take on that.
That's
Just
fine. I just want
big
you to
picture.
make sure, just
Yeah.
make sure you don't give up a 6% or a 7% earnings on your trust money, which is where your stabilization is, thinking
Yeah.
you're gaining because you're really not. Your
I take your
net is
point.
the difference. And if
Yeah.
your net spread is 2% or 1%, you might want to hang on to that money.
Got it.
Well, is
I
that a
do want to
question?
be clear to make sure that I'm following correctly. If right now you're working on FY26, so if you're planning to budget to pay off the backhoe in FY26, you still need to budget that just shy of $6,000 in interest because there will still be an interest payment due in FY26 at the time that you're paying it off. You're just now not budgeting the next year for FY27 to pay interest or pay anything because it'll be gone. But I think when you just demonstrated the spreadsheet to me, I think you eliminated that interest payment altogether.
We couldn't pay it in July?
Well, that wouldn't be an no, because this money's being borrowed in
May.
May in FY25.
So we might have to borrow. Right, might have to borrow for a month or two. Is there not a early, there's usually not early payment penalties. And we've already budgeted for FY25, so if we were able to pay it off in July, or, make a payment in July with stabilization, wouldn't that eliminate most of that interest cost?
You'd have to borrow for a month. You would pay borrowing costs of $1,000 or $500, depending upon what his borrowing costs are. That doesn't get figured in always. So you have to pay borrowing costs, you borrow for a month, and then you have to reborrow the balance for the next year. So you're borrowing twice. Because Ryan's right, you have to pay the interest payment. He doesn't have to renew for a year if you don't want him to. He can renew for from May, June, and July, 3 months. It's a 90-day renewal. And then it hits July and he pays the principal down. So you're gaining that pay down on just the amount that you're paying the backhoe off, for instance. He still has to renew the 426,000 again on a new ban.
But then that money would just sit in stabilization for that whole period of time and we'd be earning interest on the other side.
Right.
So, I mean, that's not horrible then.
No,
If
but
the-
remember, you are paying borrowing costs.
Yeah, you'd
So-
probably save $3,800 roughly, based on the cost for borrowing. And of course that is an estimated rate.
Yeah,
anyway,
no,
but
ballpark is
that's
good.
probably what you would be. That's probably where you'd come in at.
So that's how this works. So I'm not sure what we want to do next. I mean, Gabe and Ryan, it sounds like you're not thinking we should use any reserves.
I mean, I'll be transparent with you. I don't have. It's really just it's not the treasurer's wheelhouse in how you utilize, and maybe I'm wrong in that, but it's really, what I'm recommending is what I would recommend. If you, as the finance committee, who you focus on the budget, I don't follow the budget as the treasurer. If you feel, well, we will have 120,000 in our excess capacity, for example, perhaps for FY26, and you know that in FY26, then you want to use that to knock out the backhoe, that's a wise decision. I would definitely support it. But if you're maxing out your excess capacity, you don't think you have money in your stabilization, you don't think you have your money in free cash, then like free cash would be a perfect example. You shouldn't use it to fund your budget. Use it for one-time expenses. So if you have money in the free cash and you want to use it to pay off the backhoe, that would be a wise decision.
Susie.
I think in this year, we need to present to the town using all the tools wisely. I think we need to sort of touch all the bases. And we're still pretty far out from figuring this out and knowing what the numbers are. But in terms of a process, we have in the past used some of our stabilizations. We've used some of our free cash, and we've designed an operating budget. So I think that there's lots of angles to this decision, but one is to show the town that we're using all the tools in our toolbox.
I also want to, I definitely agree with that. I also, my concern is we're going to have other capital purchases. And, we like to piggyback purchases or debt service. And well, I guess it would have been 5 years anyway, so that's really not an issue here. But I am concerned about what our other capital requests are this year and how they're going to fit into this puzzle.
Yeah. So speaking of that,
My only,
yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
no, my only reservation, and this is not really from the hat as a treasurer in any way, shape, or form. It's from like a taxpayer and a former select board member. My reservation with using your stabilization funds and not using your excess levy and your tax capacity to fund things like your debt is that you lose that money forever. Like, I truly think that you should be maximizing your tax capacity to benefit the taxpayers in the town. And you should kind of have like a consistent flow in your budget of paying for things. You're always going to need new fire trucks, ambulances, police cruisers, backhoes, dump trucks. So you should, in my opinion, a budget makes sense when you're funding it from your taxpayers to always be buying these pieces of equipment that have a 5-year lending structure, and just kind of have it always on there. So you don't have these, and as a tax collector in another town, you don't have these crazy years where everyone's like, oh, this is great, and oh my gosh, this is awful. Oh, this is great, this is awful. It's just kind of like a consistent budget practice.
But isn't that,
again, not from a treasurer perspective?
But isn't that what we're accomplishing by having this capital transfer in our budget, so that when debt service is down, we're maintaining a placeholder in the budget. We're putting that fund in the stabilization, and it's giving us stronger reserves, but we're not removing it from the tax base.
Yeah, as long as you always have it in there and you're always funding and you're planning to move the money and you're not using it as a way to offset your tax capacity, that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, good.
Susie.
And we have had a very stable budget, and we've met things, and we've used tools in the toolbox, and includes the tax levy. This is an unusual year between health insurance and retirement costs and all sorts of things. We will be using all the tools, and it will appear to be a different year than last year. But we have had a pretty stable use of our capital stabilization and free cash to fund projects as they go along. And I guess we do need to hear what the new capital ones are to know where we are. But we're pretty far from nailing this down. It's just like trying to understand the pros and cons of using capital stabilization and moving forward on our costs to meet those costs. That's where we're at.
Yeah. Yes. So just a couple things to keep in mind, to just remind everybody of our fiscal guidelines. Call for us having what is it, 10% of our annual budget or free cash reserves that are equivalent to 10% of our operating budget. We have we're at 13.8 before considering any capital items this year. So we've got some room to play there. And then our other guideline is that calls for our stabilization funds to be at least 5% of our, so we've got some wiggle room there too. Gabe, do we have like a heads up on any I feel like the capital planning process this year is kind of behind.
They are behind. I've talked to Ellen a couple of times. She's trying to get her group together. They have very little asked from departments. Now, the one department, the highway department that's asking has a lot. They're asking for a lot. They need 2 trucks or 1 or 2 trucks. So I don't know how capital planning is prioritizing. I don't know what your rolling stock capital plan is. But your rolling stock should be going on a debt every time a truck is paid off. A new truck should be put on. You shouldn't have anything from the police department. They have their stuff looks like it's up to date. So the only one that I know of that's given us capital requests is highway
Is highway.
and the school.
Yeah.
The school gave 1, and I can't remember how much it was. It was quite a bit. We denied one of them, the 6,000. You heard about that because it's fluid, and that's not part of capital planning.
Was it sidewalk stuff?
Parking lot.
Parking lot.
Parking lot. Yeah.
Parking lot. That makes sense.
All right. Yeah.
That's been around for a while.
Okay. All right.
On that issue, the capital planning, we hopefully will have a meeting within the next week or 2. I don't know where we're at on that, Gabe, but I did respond to the request for available times, and I think George did too.
I
So
know
we're ready to go.
I know well, I can't speak for Ellen. I know she told me yesterday or today. No, what is today? Tuesday? She told me this morning that she was having trouble getting a committee together. I think she's waiting for too many people. I don't know what your quorum requirements are. I do want to say something about your stabilization. 300,000 may seem like a lot of money, but it's not. You get a student in that school that has special needs, they can chew up $150,000 a year, just like that. So that is a concern. When you said earlier, George, when you said you sensed I wasn't really for it, that's my reservation. I always want to keep money in case you have, especially since you own your school, in case you have needs in that area. And you'll never know when they hit you. Because they'll hit you hard when it comes in.
Just really quick to Susie's point about this year, and how it's different, if you will. And I don't follow too closely the individual budget in town because I'm not a taxpayer and I'm just here to do the job. But one of the big benefits of the ban and this renewal process on an annual basis for the years that you can do it is it does provide that flexibility where you could have maybe you wanted to pay it down like you're talking about right now. But if we had already done the serial note, you do not have the option to pay it down early. You're locked in and you pay that interest every year. You pay the principal every year and you cannot pay it early because it was a good year and you want to. So this really does give us the flexibility to even be having this conversation. We wouldn't be able to have it if last year we had immediately done the serial note long-term borrowing, and we would probably be locked in at a closer to 6% rate.
Okay. All right. George?
Yeah, just one other thing I want to say. One thing I've been thinking about given how large our deficit is, and the fact that we're probably going to need excess levy capacity to balance this budget this year. Depending on the amount of that, if that ends up being a very large number, I wouldn't be opposed to using a little stabilization, some stabilization, so that we didn't have a full impact on the taxpayers. I know that's running against some of the advice I just heard, but if we're going to cause a big increase in the tax levy, I would like to try and smooth it out over 2 years and not have it hit the taxpayers all at once. And I think that's also a concept that the taxpayers might agree with. Just something to consider as we look at these.
George, when you say use some stabilization, are you talking for operating?
Yes,
Or
as a revenue source, yes.
for operating, not capital, not specifically.
Right.
Okay.
1 year, just
Mhm.
so that the subsequent years increase, this year's increase, FY26 increase, and then FY27 increases, we'd be stepping up instead of dropping it all into the tax levy.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're suggesting is, I mean, we've done this for a couple of budget years in a row now, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, last year we used free cash and we
Mhm.
had specific purposes and they were all pretty much one time. We looked
Mhm.
for things that looked like they weren't going to be recurring in the budget, and that's what
Right.
we applied most of that to. It's not true for
Yeah.
all of it because we increased the FinCom reserve and the town
Mhm.
accountant at special town meeting. I'm sorry, the town administrator at special town meeting. So it's not entirely 100% true, but last year when we presented a budget to the town, the free cash items, the things that were funded from free cash at that point were one-time items.
Right.
May I,
Yeah,
George,
please, Bob.
to that remark? I think we should have this discussion later in in our budget preparation, but
Mhm.
I do strongly go against the idea of funding recurring expenses from reserves. However, I do support buying equipment, capital equipment such as the backhoe from reserves, which would have a similar effect on the budget because it would reduce the at some point, at least it would reduce the obligations on the budget for that piece of equipment. Maybe not immediately after being enlightened by Gabe and Brian, but I think that long term, paying for equipment from reserves is a good policy. Save up and then buy. That's better than paying interest, as far as I'm concerned. But let's have this discussion when we firm up this
Yeah.
draft budget a little better, because we're going to have to figure something out. There's a big gap.
Yeah, well, so right, and of course, as we've already said, there's an important unknown here, which is we don't have any FY26 capital requests to contemplate right now. So we've got to wait until we have that info. But it sounds like perhaps you guys will have, perhaps capital planning will meet by the time we have our next meeting, right? Does that seem likely?
Yeah.
No, I don't
No?
know.
All right.
I don't know. I can't meet next week, and Ellen didn't post the meeting for this week, so
All right.
I mean, meet without me. If you guys can get together, I'll miss the first one.
One of our members is in New Zealand.
Yeah,
And,
Michael.
I don't know the school committee member. Is that Jeremy or somebody?
Nate Longcoat.
Yeah,
Nate,
the law code. So I guess we'd need 3 people for a quorum, and I guess might be hard to do. Oh, we'll have Ellen, myself, and maybe Mr. Longcoat. So maybe we can meet with that quorum.
If we could, I mean, I guess one of the thought is worst case scenario, we could at least know what the request is, right? And we can use it for the purpose of having some placeholders for our discussion. With the understanding that we're planning for something that hasn't yet been approved by the capital planning committee, but
I think Gabe has provided us members with that information, haven't you, Gabe?
Okay, got it.
I did get an email, so I can bring that to our next meeting.
Yeah, I think that we might have to.
Yeah.
We might have to start with that, just because I don't know we have the luxury of just like holding off this, putting this discussion off further. Okay. All right, George.
I can email you the capital requests. I have them. So I can email the board so they can see them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit unusual because usually we have the capital planning sort of deal with it,
But
have their discussion.
Give you an idea. It'll give you.
Yeah, exactly. I think we need to have a sense of at least what's potentially on the table for this year, so we can model this out. Okay, great. All right, George, thanks for putting this together. So we'll pick up where we left off at our next meeting then.
And George, can you send out that tool, the CapEx tool?
It's on our drive, our Google Drive.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll forward it.
I got to fix
That'd
one
be email as well.
formula on it. I'll do it tonight.
Okay. Great. Okay. Next up, we have Four Towns debrief. I'm going to keep this brief just because we've been running for a while, but I'll let you all know that the school committee, the regional school committee, has scheduled their budget hearing for February 26th, and they've already posted a budget book. And that budget book has the proposed budget that Shannon put together and presented at our Four Towns meeting. So my assumption is that they're gonna move forward with that budget. The one that we looked at and discussed at the Four Towns meeting. I think Amherst is still, a big question mark, because I think they do have some concerns independent of the 3.5% increase. I think they have some concerns about the assessment methodology. I did forward some more details from Shannon that you all can look at, about how she's calculating the modified statutory method, which I think is consistent with our understanding, with one exception. And maybe Susie and George, you can kind of refresh my memory. I thought that the way Doug Slaughter had calculated or implemented the modified statutory method is it took a 5-year rolling average of minimum contributions. She is not doing that. She is taking just kind of the most recent years minimum contributions. Not that it makes a huge difference. I think that email that I forwarded showed kind of some differences if she were to use the 5-year rolling average for minimum contributions. But anyway, that was one thing that I thought was interesting, and not quite. It says she sounded a little bit confused about why Doug had been calculating it that way in the past, but nevertheless. Are there any questions or concerns or things you all want me to follow up on relative to the regional budget?
Just refresh my memory. What's our tithe? What's the percentage our assessment's going to go up?
5.61.
5.6. That's that version. Okay.
Yeah, $92,000. I was surprised to see that she's not using modified statutory. I was really surprised. She's used that term all through her schedules, but I don't think she understood the difference between the modified and the statutory.
Well, so here's the thing. I think it is. So it still is different from the state statutory, because
Right.
the portion of the assessment that's being calculated on the per pupil
On the enrollment,
count
right?
is the enrollment is a 5-year rolling average.
Right.
So in any event, it's really so it's minimum. The minimum contributions portion is just looking at a single year. The per pupil enrollment portion is looking at a 5-year rolling average. So
Yeah, good point. Yeah, you're right.
yeah. And I guess I didn't actually have a chance to look at it, but she forwarded the regional agreement, and she's using the language, the very specific language that's written in there, to justify why she's only using a 1-year minimum contribution value.
Would it be very
Okay.
difficult to do that considering we've used guardrails the last couple of years? I mean,
Well, the minimum contribution, that has nothing to do with our percentage that we pay, right? That's not that number.
It is for us in Amherst, right? Because we're not the guardrail is not affecting our assessment value. So the amount that Amherst and maybe I should share the budget. Let's see. Okay. So when she applies the modified statutory formula to this number, the assessment required of $24,119,163, the amount that Amherst and Shutesbury is paying are derived from this modified statutory formula that she's calculated. And again, I shared with you her spreadsheet. The only thing you need to know about it is that it basically uses the minimum contributions required for each town as a portion, and then the balance is calculated as a function of our enrollments, and that's a 5-year rolling average. So what's happening is basically Amherst and Shutesbury's assessments are being calculated using that formula, and then the 6.5% guardrail is reducing Pelham and Leverett's payment. All right. Yeah, any other questions or any other things you all want me to follow up on? The only other thing to mention is that, oh my God, I'm just totally blanking on her name. The Amherst town councilor, Mary Jo. Mary Jo? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary Jo Haneke.
Yeah, Mary Jo Haneke did send me some spreadsheets that are kind of reflect sort of how they're thinking about it. And that came right at the same time that Shannon sent her most recent information. So I think I won't do anything before we meet next, but I think there may be an opportunity to meet with Mary Jo to kind of get some more information about kind of how they're thinking about this, about assessment method and about the budget this year. Susie.
And another piece of news that maybe you saw in the paper, the track bids were opened.
Yes.
They got a good bid that's lower than what they expected. It came in lower, and it allows all the add-ins to be included in the bid. So they're moving forward, and they're going to start this spring or summer on the track.
Yeah. Yeah. So their expectation, at least for now, I think they had like 10% sort of overage that they're budgeting for, so or contingency that they've included. So they do not anticipate needing to come to towns for any additional requests. And I think Leverett still has a CPA vote that they're going to do at their annual town meeting. So I think there's actually some additional funds that are likely to come from Leverett. But anyway, the good news is that it doesn't look like the project's going to require any additional funding. Everything they think they're going to need has been appropriated. I think there is a question about whether bleachers are part of that project, but anyway, so that was good news. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's anything else on. I'll keep following news from the region, and we'll keep you guys posted. But I think this 5.61% is currently in our budget right now. So that's the number that we're planning for at this point. Okay. So
We do minutes.
yeah, let's do minutes. So George sent 2 sets, right?
Yeah, the 4th and the 8th.
Yeah, fine. What's in here? Okay, a second. Okay. So here's the minutes from the 4th. All right. Any questions or suggestions?
These were good. I don't have any corrections.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 4th as written.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay.
Overnight aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, eye.
Closure, aye.
Einstein, aye.
They're great minutes,
And then-
George. Really, really
Yes.
great.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
So the next one is the 8th.
Yeah. So
Before town meeting.
There's a spelling error in 1A. It's supposed to be, this was a compromise to keep instead of comprise.
Oh, yeah, compromise. Yep. Got it. Actually, I was gonna ask, do I have the attendance correct up in the top under members present? I know our committee, no problem. It was, and I know Melissa was there and Eric was there, but I wasn't sure if there were other people besides Jeremy and Anna.
Nope, there was not. No other school committee people were there.
Okay, great.
And then on page 2, 5B, under what Leverett was saying, I thought maybe it should say that they had already approved 6% and they'll consider 6.5. So they had done some voting already.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't put that in here. I thought I had. Assessment calculated for each option, agreed to. Yeah, you're right. I thought I had that in here. That was like the first thing he said.
Yeah,
So, yeah, all right. So,
just the Leverett Finance Committee approved a 6% increase for the regional school budget and will now consider a 6.5.
and the select board, right?
That was a selectman that said that.
Yeah, he said finance committee and select board,
Yeah,
right? Is that what everybody else remembers? Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Right.
Yep.
So Susie, I'm sorry, I'm a little slow. Leverett Finance Committee and Select Board had approved
6%.
6% increase. Yeah, I remember, and but would accept, would consider
Right.
a higher increase. Okay, yeah, I thought I put that in here. Thank you for catching that.
That's what we're hoping will happen.
Yeah. Yes.
Hopefully there won't be a surprise at the next meeting.
There won't be another meeting, they
Yeah, I'm
said.
right. So there
No,
won't be.
no, for the regional school committee
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, they're hearing.
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
make a motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Overnight aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, eye.
Mosier, aye.
Einstein, aye.
AJ, the magic hour has rung, the bell has rung on the magic hour.
Okay, so here's the thing. So I sent the latest budget, which is fairly similar to what we talked about at our last meeting, but did have some updates. So I guess the question is it important for us to review those updates now? Or should
Well,
we, yeah,
Let me
oh,
tell you what
I
my
was
view is, if
hoping-
you don't mind. I would
Yeah,
rather have
please.
an additional meeting than have the meetings drag on and expect my brain to work with its amazing clarity and, you know, and
Understood.
Well, also, I
understood.
was hoping that Gabe would stick around for this conversation because she has the spreadsheet and she's the one who's
Yeah.
can tell us where she
So
is.
here-
We have a bunch of questions.
Here's my thought is that March 4th is our next meeting date, and we really don't have any budget discussions, or you know, we've kind of completed that process. So I think what we really can do is we've got it. We'll have this school FinCom reserve thing to talk about, but that'll be very short discussion. And then I think we can pull up the budget at that point, talk about some of the updates. We'll have some information potentially about capital planning requests. So I think we'll be able to kind of dive in and really kind of have the big discussion about how are we going to deal with that deficit, which I think right now is
300,
projected at
355.
what is it, 355?
345,
356.
342, 340, 342, 497.
yeah, that sounds right.
More or less.
Yeah, I got it right here,
It's a
actually.
lot.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. 354, 497.
354,
355,
497.
right?
Yeah.
Yep, 355.
So, Susie.
I would say that this year is, we should consider our process. When each of the departments comes, we listen and we are non-judgmental. We just hear. The departments go away, not sort of in a vacuum at that point. I believe we need to plan a meeting where all the departments, we invite them all to come in and have them understand where this budget's at. And be able to consider what the situation is. And that is not like our past practice. So I would like to be thinking about that. And because once March 4th passes, it's a rush to April 26th, which things have to be voted in the weeks before that, not that week. So I feel like if we have all the departments and they see what we're working on, they will have more understanding and perhaps more strategy with us if we go into strategies. Because when you come to town meeting, I believe we want to have a lot of understanding and a lot of sort of support for the processes that we pick.
So how would you envision that? Is a Zoom meeting that would invite everybody, not on a scheduled time, but there would be listening to our process and submitting questions to us?
They would never have seen the budget as a whole. They've only
Right.
seen their pieces, and we've only been neutral or whatever in listening to theirs. I think they need to have a time where they see it as a whole and understand some of the strategies we decide to use so they can have more understanding and be on board. And so what does that look like? I would assume it's a Zoom meeting, and we distribute the document so that they can look at it and we have some sort of summary highlights of what we see in it that what we're wrestling with.
I think there's some merit to that idea, Susie. I do agree, but I think we should look at the budget together first.
Of
And
course.
maybe we should
I'm
send a
not
letter out
talking-
to the departments and
Yeah.
tell them that we have this gap and that we're looking for creative ideas of how to close it, and we would like them to review their requests before.
Yeah, I'm just saying March 4th is our next meeting. And if we're gonna, and we need to wrestle with this lion, and then we need to have a plan to put in, I believe we need to have a plan to put in a meeting with the departments. And so looking at our schedule, I believe we need to see that.
Yeah,
Get the ball rolling on that.
that could be March 18th. Okay, yeah, and that's a good idea. George.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in regards to that, I think if we're gonna have to cut budgets and we're not gonna be able to fulfill all the requests, then it would be good to have everybody work collaboratively. I think it's a great idea. But I do want to remind everybody, $355,000 deficit is caused by 7 items. I was looking at the budget today and I was just looked at the biggest items. There are 7 items that are over $10,000 increase. And, the first 3 are the schools and health insurance, and those alone amount to $321,000. So we can meet with the other departments. Sure, I think that's a good idea. But, our problem is in the schools and the health insurance.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, but the police department's making a change, and that's going to be a big jump. Legal expenses, maybe, but, so I don't know how much savings, how far we can cut into this deficit by the departments other than the schools.
I just think it's one of the tools in the toolbox. And I think that when we're standing up in front of town meeting, we still present a budget that they may not agree with. They're the final arbiters. But I do think they need to feel or see how we worked it. And we also have a fair increase in town administration, in the TA, in the administrative assistant. And there's a reason for every one of these. I'm not.
Yes. Administrative assistant is like 14,000. That's one of the 7 items. Town administrator is actually going down because we had a special town meeting and we bumped that line up by $20,000. So we took that line up to 95,000. So
The hire
it's actually
hasn't-
going down.
Do
The
we do
hire
that out
hasn't
of free
happened yet.
cash?
Yeah, we did. That's exactly what we did.
Yeah.
Those free cash transfers we did special town meeting, we put a few things into the operating budget.
Yeah, we did.
Right.
Yeah.
FinCom reserve by 25, and then town administrator by 20.
And there's many items that can't be cut. So I'm not saying that we're going to do it by cuts. We're going to be doing it by like 6 or 7 different things. But you can justify that if you show that you're doing those 6 or 7 things. You're not just pushing one button and getting them done.
I agree.
Yeah.
Collaboration is always good.
Mhm.
There was one other question I wanted to bring up that Gabe had asked me when we were sharing the budgets. I was helping her with a few things. She said that there's an issue coming up that we're going to need to address. Well, that can come up in the next budget meeting. But there was another item she asked me about, and that is, are we putting more fuel in for the library building? And so I was going to ask Mary Ann if, I think she told me it was going to be a 0 energy building. And seeing how she's here,
Hi George, hi everybody. So the plan for the library is that the solar panels will make the energy. They are sized to make the energy in the winter. We are adding a small amount of battery storage to the project. which will give us a little bit of extra. Can I guarantee that there won't be times when we won't use more electricity than we make? I can't guarantee that, you know, I think if solar panels are covered with snow, if we're having a bad winter, we may not make a lot of energy. If we're having a winter like last year, we'll make a lot of energy. But the solar system is designed to make all of the library's energy.
And will there be some kind of net metering arrangement or something so that when
Yeah.
so if we'll get
we're-
credits in the summer for
Right.
excess
Yeah.
production?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're applying for all kinds of incentives like that.
Yeah, I don't know if your capacity would be like my own, but in my case, I have a balance at the end of the year in my favor based upon what I produce with my panels. So
I would
I
love
hope
that.
that, hope that you'll do the same.
I would love that. That is certainly what we've asked the solar designers to design. Yours, Bob, is probably not an all-electric house. This
No.
is going to be an all-electric building. It is
Yeah.
going to have, efficient heat pump technology. So we're, fingers crossed. We've got good designers. The plan has been reviewed by National Grid. We're getting a credit from them for the solar panels and for the heat pumps that we're planning to use. I think that's $21,000, just a one-time payment. We have a commissioning agent who is responsible for reviewing the plans and then reviewing the project as it's built to make sure that the systems are working as promised. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're making all of the energy that we need. It's going to be a fossil-free building, fossil fuel-free building, with the exception of we will need to have a roll-up generator, probably, and that would be a fossil fuel powered generator. But we haven't looked into that yet. So we don't need to buy, more propane. I don't know how I think town hall is also heated with propane, and I don't know how the other town buildings are heated.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, anything else for tonight?
I'm
I
good.
just want to mention that I'm not going to be available on I won't be here on the March 4th meeting.
Okay. All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Arbornitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, eye.
Osier, aye.
And Stein, aye. Good night.
It was
Night.
fun.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.